We spend so much of our lives learning how to be a good guest in other people's hearts. We memorize their preferences. We learn exactly where the floorboards creak so we can walk softly. And we adjust our volume so we never disrupt their peace. But have you ever stopped to look at how you treat your own inner home? For a long time, I treated my own heart like a waiting room, a functional, sterile place where I just sat and waited for someone else to arrive and tell me it was safe to decorate, safe to unpack, safe to stay. It is a strange kind of exhaustion, isn't it? To walk through the world feeling like you are constantly auditioning for a role in your own life. You find yourself over-preparing for casual conversations, looking at your reflection in a window pane, wondering if the person staring back is actually you, or just a composite of everyone you've ever tried to please. We look outside ourselves for a sense of permission. We think, if they love me, then this heavy armor I'm wearing must be working. But the armor doesn't just keep people out, it keeps you locked in. Think about how much energy goes into that constant reshaping. It begins so quietly. You sit at a dinner table and notice someone tense up, so you automatically change the topic to something lighter. You receive a text message, and instead of replying with what you actually feel, you draft and redraft a response 4 times, deleting the sentences that feel too honest, too heavy, or too demanding. You trim your edges. You soften your anger into a polite smile. You take your sadness and tuck it away in a drawer because you don't want to be a burden to someone else's afternoon. And at the end of the day, you lie awake in the dark, feeling an ache that you cannot quite name. It is the ache of being deeply known by no one, because you have hidden the only parts of yourself that could actually be known. We treat our hearts like a house we are trying to sell. We keep the walls painted a neutral beige so that anyone can walk in and picture themselves living there. We stage the furniture perfectly. We hide the clutter, the old newspapers, the broken things we haven't figured out how to fix yet. We stand by the front door, offering a welcoming smile, desperately hoping a visitor will look around and decide to stay. But the tragedy of living this way is that even if they do stay, even if they praise the layout and admire the view, a quiet voice inside you whispers, "They only like this place because I hid everything that makes it mine." You become a tenant in a space you built, constantly terrified that if you drop your guard, if you show a single crack in the plaster or let out a loud sob, the guest will pack their bags and leave you behind. This quiet ache is what happens when you realize you have become a stranger to your own comfort. You know exactly how to soothe a coworker's anxiety. You know how to validate a partner's bad day. And you know how to make a friend feel like the center of the universe. You have an abundance of tenderness for the world outside your window. But when the front door closes and you are left alone with your own mind, that tenderness vanishes. The silence feels heavy, almost hostile. You don't know how to sit on your own couch without feeling like you should be doing something productive to earn your right to rest. You don't know how to look at your own tears without feeling a sense of impatience, asking yourself why you aren't over this yet. We have become so afraid of our own depth because no one ever taught us how to swim in it. We were taught how to tread water in everyone else's oceans, making sure they never drowned, while our own shorelines were slowly eroding. It is a profound loneliness to realize that you are the only person who hasn't been invited into your own heart. But recognizing this ache is not a sign that you are broken. It is actually the very first step of awakening. The ache is your heart's way of knocking on its own door, asking you to finally come inside, turn on the lights, and stop living in the hallways of other people's expectations. When we are younger, we learn how to survive. If we grew up around people who were unpredictable, we learned to become hyper-aware. You might have become the person who can read the subtle shift in a room's atmosphere the moment you walk through the door. You notice the exact tone of a footsteps on the stairs, or the specific way a door is closed. That hyper-awareness wasn't a flaw. It was your safety net. It kept you protected. But the tools we use to survive a storm can become the very things that suffocate us in the calm. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Moving toward that choice is terrifying because it means acknowledging that the armor, the constant pleasing, the perfectionism, the emotional distance is no longer serving you. It's heavy. You are carrying a shield against a war that ended years ago, and your arms are tired. It is okay to admit that you are tired of defending yourself against ghosts. Think about the sheer amount of weight you carry every single day just to keep up appearances. We don't realize how heavy the armor is until we try to take a deep breath and find that our chest can't fully expand. This armor takes many forms. For some of us, it is the armor of being completely unbothered. We tell everyone, "It's fine, I don't mind, I can handle it." We become the reliable ones, the pillars of strength who never break down, because we believe that if we show a single moment of vulnerability, everything around us will collapse. For others, the armor is perfectionism. We think if we can just perform well enough, if we can avoid making mistakes, if we can anticipate every problem before it happens, then nobody can hurt us. We build a wall made of accomplishments and gold stars, hoping it will shield our fragile inner self from rejection. But what happens when you spend your whole life hiding behind a shield? You look at your relationships and realize that while you are safe from being hurt, you are also completely cut off from being loved. True connection requires a soft surface, but all people encounter when they try to get close to you is cold, hard metal. You find yourself feeling lonely even when you are surrounded by a crowded room of people who care about you. They love the armor, you think. They love the helper, the strong one, the person who always says yes. They don't know the person shivering underneath the metal suits. They don't see the kid who is still terrified of being told they are too much, or not enough, or entirely wrong for just existing. It takes an incredible amount of bravery to look at your armor and thank it for its service instead of hating it. It is easy to feel angry at ourselves for being so guarded, for pushing people away, or for shutting down when things get intense. But that guard was your best friend for a very long time. It was the only thing that kept your heart intact when the environment around you was chaotic, cold, or conditional. It did its job beautifully. It got you to this exact moment. But you are not in that old environment anymore. The room you are standing in right now is different. The people around you are different. Or at the very least, you are different. You have more agency now. You have more control over your life than you did back then. Taking off the armor doesn't happen all at once in a dramatic moment. It happens in tiny, quiet choices. It happens when you admit to a friend that you are actually having a really hard day instead of giving your usual rehearsed answer. It happens when you allow your hands to shake during a difficult conversation instead of forcing them into pockets to hide your nerves. It happens when you stop pretending to have everything figured out. Every time you allow yourself to be seen in your raw, unpolished humanity, you loosen a strap on that heavy suit. You give your heart a little more room to breathe. You start to realize that your safety doesn't come from being invulnerable. Your safety comes from knowing that even if you get hurt, even if the storm hits, you are strong enough to hold your own hand through the dark. There is a cultural narrative we swallow without even realizing it. The idea that we are inherently incomplete. We are told we are half circles looking for our other half, or puzzles missing the final, crucial piece. So we search. We look for that feeling of safety in a new job title, in the validation of a mentor, or in the text message we keep refreshing our screen to receive. We think, if they just say the right words, the emptiness will stop echoing. But relying on external validation to feel safe is like building a house on borrowed land. The moment the landlord changes their mind, your entire foundation crumbles. The truth is, you were never a fraction. You were always a whole number. The love, the safety, and the reassurance you are constantly begging other people to give you are things they don't actually possess the keys to. They can offer you a temporary shelter, yes, but they cannot build the permanent home inside your chest. Only you can do that. Think about the quiet desperation of that search. It is like walking through a crowded marketplace with an empty cup, holding it out to every passerby, hoping someone will drop just a few drops of approval into it. You find yourself changing your shape based on who is standing in front of you. With one person, you become quieter and more intellectual. With another, you become louder and more adventurous. You look into their eyes, not to see them, but to see a reflection of yourself that is acceptable. You wait for them to nod, to smile, to say, "You are doing well," because until they do, you feel entirely invisible. This chasing creates a profound inner restlessness. You cannot sit still in your own life because you are always wondering where the next source of reassurance is going to come from. We look for this missing piece in our achievements too. We think if we can just cross the next finish line, if we can buy the house with the bigger kitchen, if we can get our names on the right list, the small, anxious voice inside us will finally fall silent. We tell ourselves, once I get there, I will feel like I belong. But when you reach that milestone, you realize the horizon has simply moved further away. The emptiness is still sitting there, waiting for you in the quiet moments when the applause dies down. It is a heart-breaking realization to discover that no amount of external noise can drown out the silence of a heart that doesn't know how to love itself. You cannot fill a spiritual or emotional void with things that can be taken away from you. Carl Jung spoke deeply about this search for wholeness outside of ourselves. He noted that we often project our own hidden beauty and our own unmet needs onto others, expecting them to carry the weight of our completion. But another person cannot fill a hole that was dug by your own self-abandonment. When we expect a partner, a friend, or a career to make us feel whole, we are asking them to do an impossible job. We are placing a burden on them that they were never meant to bear. When they inevitably fall short, because they are just human beings trying to navigate their own chaos, we feel betrayed. We think they didn't love us enough, but the truth is, we didn't love ourselves enough to stop demanding that they rescue us. The shift happens when you stop looking at your emptiness as a void to be filled and start looking at it as a space to be occupied by you. It means realizing that the missing piece isn't out there in the world. It is the part of you that you left behind when you decided you had to be perfect to be loved. You do not need to be completed by another person's presence. You need to be visited by your own attention. When you start to pour that love back into yourself, the cup stops being empty. You stop begging for crumbs because you are learning how to bake your own bread. You look at your own reflection, not to see if you are pleasing to the world, but to welcome back the person who has been waiting for you all along. What does it actually mean to look at yourself? Not the idealized version of you that you present on social media or during a first meeting, but the real you. The you that makes mistakes, the you that gets anxious when plans change unexpectedly, the you that sometimes feels incredibly envious of a friend's success. It is very easy to love the polished versions of ourselves. It is much harder to look at our rough edges without wanting to immediately sand them down. When we begin the process of self-discovery, we often run into the parts of ourselves we've spent years trying to hide. We find our anger, our sadness, our deep-seated insecurity. Our first instinct is to push them back into the dark. But healing doesn't mean erasing these parts. It means introducing them to each other. It means looking at your anxiety and saying, I see you. I understand why you're trying to protect me right now. But we are safe. Think about how terrifying it is to sit in a quiet room with no background noise, no distractions, and just let your thoughts catch up to you. Most of us avoid that mirror at all costs. We fill our calendars until they are bursting. We keep podcasts playing while we cook. and we jump from one task to the next because the moment the noise stops, the reflection appears. And that reflection often feels too heavy to bear. In that quiet, you might feel the sudden, sharp ache of a regret from 3 years ago. You might feel the weight of a sadness you thought you had outrun. When we turn the mirror inward, our first reaction is often judgment. We look at our vulnerability and call it weakness. We look at our fear and call it cowardice. We become a harsh judge in a trial where we are also the defendant. And we never let ourselves off the hook. But what if we changed the way we looked into the mirror? What if, instead of looking for flaws to correct, we looked for the hurt that needs to be held? When you look closely, you start to see that your anger isn't just a random outburst. It is the part of you that feels like your boundaries were crossed and no one defended you. You see that your envy isn't just malice. It is a map pointing directly to the desires you've denied yourself because you didn't think you were worthy of them. Carl Jung understood this painful, beautiful process of inner confrontation. He recognized that we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. When you look inward with the sole intention of fixing yourself, you are still operating from the belief that you are fundamentally broken. Turning the mirror inward in a simple, emotional way means learning to look at yourself with the eyes of a gentle friend. Imagine a friend came to you and confessed they were feeling completely overwhelmed, lost, and afraid they were failing at everything. You wouldn't yell at them. You wouldn't list all their faults or tell them to pull themselves together. You would probably sit next to them, put an arm around their shoulder and say, "It's okay to feel this way. I'm right here with you." Yet, when it comes to our own internal world, we act like a drill sergeant. We demand immediate recovery, flawless performance, and emotional silence. The true work of this section is about changing your gaze. It is about sitting with the discomfort of your own humanity and refusing to look away. It means watching yourself feel a wave of jealousy or a surge of panic. And instead of pushing it down, you breathe through it. You let the feeling wash over you, knowing that a wave cannot break the ocean. When you stop running from what is inside you, the mirror stops being a place of fear. It becomes a place of meeting. You look at your own eyes, and you realize that the person you have been searching for in every room, in every relationship, and in every achievement was looking back at you through the glass the entire time, just waiting for you to smile back. To truly feel safe in your own heart, you have to be willing to welcome back the versions of yourself you abandoned in order to fit in. Think about the version of you from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Maybe it was the teenager who felt incredibly awkward and chose to withdraw completely, or the young adult who stayed in a bad situation because they didn't think they deserved better. It is easy to look back at those versions of ourselves with shame or regret, but that shame only deepens the divide inside us. Carl Jung captured this internal struggle perfectly when he observed, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." It is terrifying Because acceptance means giving up the illusion that we can change our past by punishing ourselves in the present. When you accept yourself, you stop refereeing your own emotions. You stop telling yourself that you shouldn't feel sad or shouldn't feel hurt. You simply let the feeling exist, knowing it doesn't define your entire existence. Think about how many pieces of yourself you have dropped along the highway of your life just to make your cargo lighter for other people to carry. Maybe you dropped your playfulness because someone told you that you were being childish. Maybe you dropped your sensitivity because someone called you too dramatic or too fragile. We lock these parts away in dark basement rooms of our mind, hoping they will just disappear. But they don't disappear. They stay down there, knocking on the floorboards, waiting to be heard. When we refuse to integrate these forgotten parts, we feel a strange, hollow sensation inside. We feel like we are living a life that is only half true. We are presenting a carefully curated version of ourselves to the world, while the rest of our soul is shivering in exile. It takes immense emotional courage to walk down into that basement and turn on the light. Integrating these parts means sitting down with the version of you that made that embarrassing mistake, or the version of you that was so desperate for love that you tolerated disrespect. Instead of looking at that past self with anger and thinking, "How could you be so stupid?" you look at them with tears in your eyes and say, "You were just trying to survive. You didn't know any better, and I forgive you." When you do this, something beautiful shifts. The war inside you stops. You stop trying to divorce your past and start trying to understand it. You realize that every single version of you, even the broken, messy ones, was doing the absolute best they could with the tools they had at the time. This integration is a slow, emotional reclaiming of your home. It's like finding old family photos that you hid away because the memories hurt too much, and finally putting them back on the mantle. You begin to realize that your sensitivity wasn't a weakness. It was your capacity to care deeply. Your anger wasn't a defect. It was your boundary system trying to keep you safe when you didn't know how to speak up. Even your fear had a purpose. When you bring these parts back into the warmth of your attention, they stop acting out. They stop causing sudden bursts of anxiety or unexplained sadness in the middle of a regular day. They finally calm down because they are no longer being ignored. To accept yourself completely is to realize that you are an entire tapestry, not just a single thread. You cannot cut out the dark threads without unraveling the whole picture. The goal of healing is not to become a perfect, flawless statue. It is to become a whole human being who is no longer fighting an internal civil war. When you integrate these forgotten parts, you walk through the world with a different kind of presence. You aren't easily shaken by other people's opinions because you already know everything about yourself, and you have chosen to love it anyway. You look at your history, and you don't see a collection of failures. You see a long, brave journey of a heart that kept beating, waiting for you to finally come back and claim it all. Safety is not the absence of conflict or discomfort. It is the presence of connection to yourself. Think about how you feel when you are around someone you truly trust. You don't have to rehearse your sentences before you speak. You don't have to sit up perfectly straight or hide your fatigue. You can just exhale. Now, ask yourself, do you allow yourself to exhale when you are alone? Creating internal safety means making a promise to yourself that you will no longer abandon you. It means when you make a mistake at work, like sending a presentation with an error or forgetting an appointment, your inner voice doesn't immediately turn into a harsh critic. Instead of saying, "How could you be so foolish?" you practice saying, "We made a mistake, and we will fix it." It sounds simple, but shifting that internal dialogue from an adversary to an ally changes the entire landscape of your mind. Think about what it feels like to live in a body that doesn't feel safe to inhabit. It feels like standing on a frozen lake, constantly listening for the sound of ice cracking beneath your feet. You are always on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the moment everything falls apart. When you live with this constant internal tension, your mind becomes a chaotic place. You start to view your own emotions as threats. If a wave of sadness washes over you while you are making dinner, you immediately panic and try to push it away. You think, if I let myself feel this, I'll never stop crying. If you feel a flash of anger, you judge yourself instantly, burying it beneath a layer of guilt. But true safety is not about keeping your inner landscape perfectly still and undisturbed. Safety means knowing that even if a massive storm rolls through your emotional world, your foundation is strong enough to weather it. To build this foundation, you have to stop treating your own vulnerability like a liability. For so many years, you might have believed that being strong meant being unshakable, like a stone wall. But walls break under enough pressure. True strength is more like a tree that knows how to bend with the wind, so its branches don't snap. Carl Jung spoke to this deep necessity of internal alignment, reminding us that we cannot find peace by pretending to be something we are not. When you create an environment of internal safety, you are creating a sanctuary where every emotion is allowed to sit down at the table. You stop policing your thoughts. You stop telling yourself that you are wrong for feeling hurt by something small. You give yourself permission to just exist, exactly as you are in this very moment, without needing to justify your feelings to anyone, including yourself. This foundation is built in the quiet, mundane moments of your day. It is built when you feel a sudden wave of loneliness while walking down a busy street. And instead of pulling out your phone to distract yourself, you just take a deep breath. You place a hand on your chest and mentally say to yourself, "I feel lonely right now, and that's okay. I am right here with you." It is built when you are completely exhausted after a long day, and instead of forcing yourself to cross the 3 more things off your to-do list to feel productive, you listen to your body and lie down on the couch. Every single time you choose kindness over criticism, you are pouring another brick into the foundation of your safety. You are proving to your nervous system that you are a reliable caretaker. When you finally establish this internal safety, the entire world changes around you. You stop looking at other people as judges who hold the power to validate or destroy you. You stop entering rooms wondering if people like you, and you start wondering if you even have the energy for them. You realize that the opinions, the rejections, and the unpredictability of the outside world can still sting, but they can no longer destroy you. The storm can shake the windows and rattle the doors of your house, but it cannot tear down the walls, because you are anchored deep within your own heart. You have built a home inside yourself that no one else can take away. We often treat self-compassion like a luxury or a reward we only deserve once we've achieved perfection. We tell ourselves, once I lose the weight, or once I get the promotion, or once I stop feeling so anxious, then I will treat myself with kindness. But you cannot criticize yourself into a version of yourself that you will love. It simply doesn't work. The growth you are looking for can only take root in a climate of warmth. Think about a time you tried to learn something completely new, like learning to drive a car or playing an instrument. You didn't expect to be flawless on day one. You expected to stall the engine. You expected to play the wrong notes. Why then do we expect ourselves to be master artists at the craft of living without ever allowing ourselves to practice? Self-compassion is the willingness to be a beginner at your own healing every single day. Think about how incredibly harsh your inner world can be when nobody else is watching. If a friend came to your house, sat on your kitchen floor, and wept because their life felt too heavy, you would never look down at them and say, "Why are you crying over this? You should be stronger by now." You would kneel down beside them. You would make them a warm cup of tea. You would listen without interrupting. And you would let them cry for as long as they needed to. Yet, when you are the one sitting on that metaphoric kitchen floor, your internal voice often becomes a cruel taskmaster. You tell yourself to pull it together, to hide the tears, to stop being so sensitive. We hold ourselves to a standard of absolute invulnerability that we would never demand from anyone else we love. Self-compassion is the slow, deliberate process of unlearning that cruelty. It means acknowledging that suffering is a part of being human, and that you are allowed to be hurt by things that hurt. It means giving up the exhausting habit of grading your own pain. You don't need to justify your sadness by comparing it to someone else's worse situation. Your pain doesn't need a passport or a validation stamp to be worthy of comfort. Carl Jung wrote beautifully about the necessity of this gentle turning toward oneself. He suggested that the path to true understanding requires us to approach our own souls with the same patience and curiosity we would give to a mystery we want to solve, rather than a problem we need to eliminate. When you stop fighting your own emotional weather, the climate inside your mind begins to change. This art is practiced in the tiny choices of a regular afternoon. It is found when you look at a project you messed up, or a conversation where you said the wrong thing, And instead of letting the familiar wave of shame wash over you, you take a slow, deep breath. You tell yourself, "It's okay. You were tired. You did the best you could in that moment, and we can try again tomorrow." It is found when you allow yourself to have a messy day where nothing goes right. And instead of punishing yourself by staying up late to make up for it, you choose to go to sleep early because your body needs the rest. It is the recognition that your worth is not a bank account that fluctuates based on how productive, polite, or perfect you were today. When you begin to practice self-compassion, you start to notice how much of your life was driven by fear. You realize you were running on the fuel of self-hatred, believing that if you weren't hard on yourself, you would simply stop growing. But the opposite is true. Fear freezes you, while compassion thaws you out. It allows the stuck emotions to finally flow and leave your body. You stop viewing your setbacks as evidence that you are a failure, and you start seeing them as moments where you simply need a little extra care. You become the gentle presence you always looked for in the world. You look at your scars, your stumbles, and your ongoing struggles, and instead of wishing them away, you wrap them in a warm blanket of patience, knowing that a heart cannot bloom under pressure. It can only bloom when it feels entirely safe. You cannot feel safe in your own heart if you allow everyone to walk through it with dirty shoes. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls meant to keep people away, but they are actually the gates that let the right things in and keep the wrong things out. When you have no boundaries, you constantly overcommit. You say yes to hosting the dinner party when you are exhausted. You agree to take on extra work when your schedule is already overflowing. Every time you say yes to someone else at the expense of your own well-being, you are telling your inner self that their needs matter more than yours. That builds a deep sense of internal betrayal. Setting a boundary, saying, "I would love to help, but I don't have the capacity for this right now," is how you show your heart that you are looking out for it. It is how you prove to yourself that you are safe in your own custody. Think about the physical sensation of having your boundaries crossed. It usually starts as a tight knot in your stomach, a sudden flash of heat, or a heavy wave of resentment that hits you the moment you agree to something you secretly want to decline. For the longest time, you might have felt like a hostage to other people's expectations. You became a person who answers every phone call on the first ring, who stays late to clean up after an event that wasn't yours to manage, and who listens to hours of complaints from people who never bother to ask how you are doing. You do it because you are terrified that if you say no, they will think you are selfish, unkind, or difficult. You trade your own peace of mind just to buy a few moments of their approval. But we have to look honestly at the cost of that trade. When you live without boundaries, you aren't actually being loving. You are just being compliant. You are offering people a hollow version of yourself because underneath your polite smile, a quiet resentment is brewing. You start to dread the sound of your phone vibrating. You find yourself withdrawing from the people you care about because every interaction feels like a demand you don't have the strength to meet. Carl Jung touched upon this dynamic when he explored how we lose ourselves when we live entirely for the roles we play for others. He pointed out that trying to be everything to everyone eventually leaves us with nothing for ourselves. When you refuse to set boundaries, you are abandoning the one person you are actually responsible for protecting: you. Learning to say no is an incredibly emotional milestone. The first few times you do it, your heart will probably race, your voice might wobble, and you might feel an intense surge of guilt. That guilt isn't a sign that you did something wrong. It is just the old survival mechanism throwing a tantrum because you are breaking the rule that kept you small. It takes immense courage to sit with that discomfort and realize that someone else's disappointment is not an emergency you are required to fix. You are allowed to let people be disappointed. You are allowed to let them sit with their own reactions while you sit in your quiet room, protecting your energy. A boundary is ultimately an act of radical honesty. It is telling someone, I care about our relationship enough to tell you where my limits are, so that I don't grow to resent you. It is letting people know exactly how to love you without hurting you. When you start honoring your own capacity, you notice a beautiful shift in your relationships. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. They will welcome your no because they want your yes to be authentic. And the people who get angry when you set a boundary are usually the ones who benefited from you having none. By standing firm in your limits, you are finally building a fortress of safety around your soul. You are looking at your time, your energy, and your peace, and deciding that they are sacred enough to defend. Many of us are still waiting for a specific apology, a specific conversation, or a specific validation from our past that will likely never come. We carry an old wound, hoping that the person who caused it will be the one to heal it. But waiting for someone else to fix what they broke keeps you tied to their timeline and their capacity. To be the love you needed means stepping into the role of the protector you wished you had. It means looking at the hurt parts of your history and saying, I am here now. I will protect you. I will listen to you. You become the parent, the friend, and the partner to yourself that you always wanted. You begin to provide the steady, unchanging presence that you used to look for in external validation. Think about how much time we spend looking back at the rearview mirror of our lives, wishing a specific person would finally see how much they hurt us. We think, if my parents would just acknowledge what happened, I could finally move on. Or, if my ex would just admit they treated me poorly, I could finally feel worthy. We are essentially keeping our healing on hold, leaving the keys to our emotional freedom in the hands of the very people who were careless with our hearts in the first place. It is a painful realization to admit that the person who broke you might never have the capacity, the awareness, or the humility to fix you. They may never understand the depth of the shadow they cast over your life. But this realization, as devastating as it feels initially, is actually where your true power is born. Carl Jung recognized this profound turning point when he noted that we cannot grow by waiting for others to change, but rather by taking responsibility for our own inner development. He observed that the most profound transformation happens when a person stops looking outward and begins to actively tend to their own psychological and emotional state. When you accept that the apology is never coming, you are finally free. You stop being a victim waiting for a rescue party, and you become the rescuer. You look at that younger, wounded version of yourself, the one who was left behind, ignored, or made to feel small, and you walk right back into that memory to pick them up. Meeting the love you needed means changing the way you show up for yourself during your darkest hours. It means when you are crying in your car or feeling completely overwhelmed in the middle of the night, you don't wait for a phone call to soothe you. You wrap your own arms around your torso. You breathe deeply, and you become the voice of absolute reassurance that you always wanted to hear. You say to yourself, I know this hurts. I know it feels like too much right now, but I am not going to leave you. I am going to stay right here on the floor with you until it passes. This is how you break the cycle of self-abandonment. You stop looking for a savior because you have finally become your own. This kind of love is not soft or passive. It is incredibly fierce. It is the love that stands up and says, no more. No more allowing yourself to be treated like an afterthought. No more settling for crumbs of affection just because you are afraid of being alone. No more shrinking your personality so that someone else can feel comfortable. When you meet the love you needed, you start providing yourself with a steady, unshakable foundation of worth. You realize that you don't need someone else to tell you that you are smart, beautiful, or good enough to exist. You already know it, because you have seen the depth of your own resilience. You look at your life not as an empty vessel waiting to be filled by a visitor, but as a warm, well-lit home where you are already completely content to live. This journey of embracing your heart is not a destination you reach and never leave. It is a daily practice of returning. There will be days when you forget everything we've talked about. There will be days when you fall back into old patterns of pleasing, or when the armor feels necessary again. That doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you are human. When those moments happen, you don't need to despair. You just need to take a deep breath, place a hand over your chest, and feel the steady rhythm of your own pulse. You are here. You have survived every single one of your worst days. Your heart has been beating for you since before you even knew what love was. It is ready for you to stop running. It is ready for you to finally come home. Think about what it means to actually come home after a very long, exhausting journey. You don't walk through the front door and immediately start critiquing the furniture. You drop your bags on the floor, you kick off your tight shoes, and you let out a sigh that comes from the very bottom of your lungs. Coming home to yourself feels exactly like that. It is the moment you stop trying to fix, alter, or improve the person you are. And you just choose to sit down with who you are right now. It is looking at your life and saying, "This is me. It is messy. It is incomplete. It is a work in progress. But it is mine. And I am no longer going to run away from it." We spend so many years trying to exile ourselves. We think if we can just move to a different city, get a different friend group, or change our lifestyle completely, we will finally escape the discomfort inside us. But wherever you go, your heart follows you. You cannot outrun your own shadow, and you don't need to. Carl Jung once remarked that his life was a story of a self-realization, a journey where the outer achievements mattered far less than what was happening on the inside. He realized that the greatest adventure we can ever take is the walk back to our own center. When you stop running, you realize that the peace you were looking for wasn't hidden in some future version of your life. It was waiting for you to stop fighting the present moment. This final section is an invitation to make peace with your own quiet presence. It is about learning to love the ordinary, unpolished moments of your existence. It is found in the mornings when you drink your coffee in complete silence, not checking your notifications, not planning your next achievement, but just feeling the warmth of the mug in your hands. It is found in the evenings when you look at your reflection before bed, seeing the tired lines around your eyes, and instead of wishing they weren't there, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for everything those eyes have carried you through. You start to realize that you don't need to live an extraordinary, flawless life to be worthy of your own love. Just existing is enough. Coming home to yourself means you are finally safe in your own custody. You are no longer waiting for a phone call to make you feel valued. You are no longer scanning a room to see if you fit in. You fit in with you. And that is a large enough country to live in. When you step into this level of self-acceptance, the world loses its power to terrify you. People can leave, circumstances can change, and plans can fall apart. But your internal foundation remains solid. You take a slow, deep breath, and you realize that you are finally exactly where you belong.